Welcome to the February 16th, 2021 voting meeting of the Exeter Township Board of School Directors. If everybody could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Fike, if we could do a roll call, please.
Allison Wilson.
Present.
Hunter Ahrens. Present. John Fiddler. Here. Dr. Ann Herring.
Present.
Dr. David Hemberger.
Here.
Michael Japina.
Physically present.
Dr. Sharon McClendon.
Here.
Uri Miller.
Present.
Michelle Stratton.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. We're going to start with our superintendent's report. Dr. Miner.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. As you know, the CDC just came out with new guidance for reopening schools. And that guidance has triggered the school district to have a pandemic task force meeting. You may recall that we assembled a pandemic task force over the summer as per PDE and DOH guidelines. And that group, the task force, has continued to meet throughout the school year. So we're going to review the new guidance from the CDC, compare it against our existing plans, as well as look at the new data that we're getting daily from the county, which has shown a decreasing viral load in our community, and prepare a recommendation to the school board to be shared at the March 2nd school board meeting in terms of how we should best proceed with our instructional models for the remainder of the school year. So I know that there's been a lot of interest in our community since that CDC report has come out. I do want to say very clearly, regardless of what the instructional model recommendation is, we have been clear, I hope we've been clear, that we will continue to offer a virtual option to students throughout the entirety of the 2020-2021 school year. So I know there's been some concern if there would be an increase in in-person time, would virtual option cease to be in existence. And we have, as a district, made a commitment to maintaining a virtual option regardless of whether or not we increase instructional time. So again, that will be reported to the board at the Education Committee meeting as part of the Committee of the Whole on March the 2nd. And between now and then, the Pandemic Task Force will meet to make a recommendation as far as planning going forward. Thank you.
Okay, we now have time for public comment. And I do not believe that any members of the public are present, or, oh, we do have somebody. Are you interested in making public comment tonight? No? Okay. And I don't believe that we have anybody virtually either. Is that correct? Okay. All right, then we will move on to our board minutes. If there's no objection, we will adopt a motion to approve meeting minutes from last month's school board meetings, January 5th and January 19th, 2021. Hearing no objections, these minutes are approved. Moving on to the treasurer's report and payment requests. If there is no objection, we will adopt a motion to approve the January 2020 treasurer's report and payment requests dated January 20th, 2021 through February 16th, 2021.
Mrs. Wilson, I did want to make a comment on this, although I think technically I'm supposed to say reserving the right to object, but I'm not going to. So one thing I just wanted to point out to the community and to the board as well was in the treasurer's report, if you look at the total funded ratio on a percentage basis, 100%, the general fund currently reads that we have over 100% revenues received for the year, and over, I believe, we're significantly over budget as well on expenditures, if I remember correctly. Part of that is due to the way that our accounting system is set up to include our bond refunding. So we just want to be attentive to that is going to be included in the general fund calculation, and that kind of distorts the picture right now. So you just want to look outside of that total funded ratio for the year. So I just wanted to make mention of that.
Okay, hearing no objections, we will approve the treasurer's report and payment requests. Moving forward, Education Committee, Dr. McClendon. Dr. McClendon, you're muted.
Thank you. I always forget to do that. Okay. So the Education Committee met on February 2nd before the board workshop. And we have 5 items for voting. I'm going to read the motion on and leave number 2 out. So it's recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the following Education Committee items. Item 1, 3, 4, and 5, and we'll do 2 separately.
Is there?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay, so it's recommended the Board of School Directors approves the following Education Committee items. Number 2, and this is a change from the way that it was written on the agenda at our workshop meeting 2 weeks ago. And so I'll read what that is. So community service requirement for the class of 2021. In response to a reduction in access to traditional community service opportunities, the high school administration proposes the following changes to the community service graduation requirement for the class of 2021. The time required will be adjusted to 15 hours. Administrators may override on an individual basis the requirement that the community service is completed for a registered 501c nonprofit organization, and students who met the standard 30-hour requirement will be recognized with a community service designation in the graduation program. So 2 weeks ago, we were going to waive the total hours. So this is a kind of a compromise between that.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted to note that, I mean, it's technically a 501c3, so just so we're aware.
I've got a question for the administration. How long has this been a requirement for our seniors?
Dr. Winters, I don't know the answer to how long the graduation requirement's been in place in the district. Do you?
I know it's been in place. Sorry. I know it's been in place at least during the 3 years that I've been here, I believe longer. Mr. Campbell is on the call via Zoom. I'd like to ask, perhaps he might know the exact time frame. I'm not certain.
I think he's been here less than
Yeah,
time than you, but
yeah.
he might know.
Yeah,
Mr.
I don't
Campbell,
know
do you
the
know?
exact duration of that requirement.
Could Mr. Flame, I'm just curious, long time?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it's been quite a while. I don't know the exact number of years.
The adoption of the policy is listed in the policy as well, and I'm trying to look that up, but I'm sure that isn't the answer to John's question.
Well, that's okay. That was really just a lead in. I've been following this issue nationally, and the debate seems to center on 2 points. One is that it's a good idea to have it as a requirement because it might introduce students to do good if they otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity. The other is that by making it a requirement, you take out the whole notion of volunteerism. I just wonder if that's ever been discussed here.
Well, I think that principle applies in the same way to us forcing students to take history if they really don't want to. You know, if they take a 4th year of history and they really don't want to, are they really learning for the sake of learning? And that's really what we want to encourage.
Well, it's a little different. I mean, you wouldn't volunteer to take history if you don't want to take history, but my point is later in life, a student might not be ready to do volunteer work as a senior, but later in life might end up doing literacy volunteer work, cooking at the soup kitchen, on and on and on. So I just wondered if that had ever come up when it was first introduced, if this board had ever engaged in that debate.
Mr. Fiddler, obviously none of us here seem to know when it was first introduced, but since it's part of policy, that this is a graduation requirement, should the board wish to examine it as part of policy review at some later date for future requirements, we can certainly do so. I think the purpose of this item is directly to serve the class of 2021. And, if there's a desire on the part of the board to have a more expanded discussion in terms of the merits generally, we could certainly do that either through the policy committee or through the education committee at some committee of the whole meeting in the future.
Sure. Well, I think that'd be a good idea because I'd like to hear from the students. What do they think?
If I can say, I made a couple of phone calls the other day and I talked to the Berks Animal Rescue League, and they said they do have options for those students that cannot be in person, such as doing an animal food drive, which you can do amongst your family. Even if you're donating 5 bags, it's still something. They can make cat toys and donate them. I also spoke to Helping Harvest Food Bank, and they are allowing students to do time there, and they're very cautious about making sure the health is the priority. Also, Hunter had mentioned the churches, so that there are options out there. I do prefer what has been brought to the board, and I do appreciate that it has been rethought. And I like the idea of giving students the option to even go to their next door neighbor who's going to need their the driveway shoveled Thursday. Those kinds of things definitely should be considered. So that's it.
Great. Thanks, Ann.
I just want to echo what Ann said.
Yes, thank you for researching that a little bit. And I agree as well. I think that even in general, when we look at our families and our students, a lot of them are volunteering their time and they're sacrificing, some of our high school kids are staying at home to babysit younger brothers and sisters who are getting off and on the buses at different times. So, that is, right now in a pandemic, that's important to a family so families can work. So I also think that is, important service. So I'm glad that we have other options, but I'm glad we're also still keeping it as a requirement. So we do have a motion. Oh, anybody else?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, I had a question for Mr. Campbell. This is, one of the things that was a concern of ours, and I think one of the reasons why this was being reconsidered, at least for this school year, was that we were a little concerned about graduation for a large portion of our students. And I just want to ask Mr. Campbell, do you have any sense that that with this new revision of the policy that students might be not be able to graduate based on the community service standard? And if so, how many might that be?
I think that exact number is difficult to predict. I think part of the concern had to do with scalability. And although there are opportunities out there, the scale and frequency of those are a little more difficult. So I think we've built in some of the flexibility that will make that more manageable for kids. We had already begun working on some options for them at school, but there too, some of that is still in access. So although those are all answers, they're not really getting to your exact question. So it's hard to say, but I think we're getting closer, and we certainly are going to be pushing the information and out to students so that we can really start to assess that as soon as we can and help those individuals who are having those troubles as soon as we can. I think in a lot of cases, students and families will be able to support themselves, but we want to really identify those who are going to need more direct intervention from us as soon as we can.
Well, I'm assuming you're going to be tracking this information as the school year progresses. Would you be able to get back to the board at some point and kind of give us an update in terms of where things stand and maybe the status of the number of students who might not be quite ready, for graduation?
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Hemberger, and I hope we have 0 students that don't graduate because of that. And that was one of the concerns that was brought up when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We are still in the middle of a pandemic, and there's, some places, but it is difficult for students to get to volunteer, and they have to be able to feel safe wherever they go. So I hope that whatever number you come back with next month, Mr. Campbell, I hope that we have 0 students who do not graduate because of not getting enough hours. We want our students graduating on their academics. And I'm not saying, volunteering is definitely important, but, in this pandemic, we can't let any students not graduate. So I hope we're doing everything we can so that doesn't happen. I just want to say, Mr. Chapina mentioned a correction about, I think, on the nonprofit. So does that have to be corrected then in the motion? Because it does say 501c about the.
I think that's just a reference to the policy itself. So I don't think it necessary. I think it's more of a typographical error than an error of substance there. So
let's just talk about the nonprofit organization.
Right. So basically the intent of the bullet is simply that the administration can approve hours that aren't for 501c3 as is required in in policy. So we can just make a note and correct that in the minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so there is a motion on the table to change the community service requirement for the class of 2021. All in favor of this motion? Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries 9-0. Do you have anything else, Dr. McClendon? You're on mute.
Okay, that the enrollment for January is also attached.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving forward, Personnel Committee, Mr. Chapina.
Thank you. It's recommended the Board of School Directors approves the following personnel items: resignations of support staff, retirements of certificated staff and support staff, appointments, support staff, extracurricular staff, and change of status, support staff, and leaves of absence, as well as the attached list of course requests and the collective bargaining agreement between the Exeter Township School District and the Exeter Township Education Support Professionals for the period of July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I'd just like to say thank you to our staff that are retiring. You've had a last year to remember, so thank you for your commitment to the Exeter School District. I'd also like to point out that 6 of our spring coaches have over 20 years of coaching our students. Justin Fries in varsity baseball, Carl Solaric in varsity baseball, Brian Sanritter, junior varsity baseball, Kevin Schaefer, senior high track, Elaine Ellison in senior high track, and Sean Gantner volleyball. So I just wanted to sort of acknowledge that's a long time to be coaching and appreciate their support of our kids in our athletics program.
I'd like to echo the same thing, Mr. Chapina. Those 4 people that are retiring are really good, positive people. I think one of them that's a highlight on her is Mr. Dybert. He actually taught both of my kids German, and he did a very good job, and they really like him. When I told them that he was retiring, I got that notice
they were both kind of saddened by it. So he's a very good teacher. He spoke German through the whole class from beginning to end. So that's what the kids liked about it. And I think he's a very good teacher, and he can be highly missed.
I want to echo what Curie said, especially about Herr Dybert. I had the good fortune of being able to see him a couple of times. He's a Brecknock Township resident, and while I was working there, I got to see him come in every once in a while, and we'd talk, and he would tell me about all the places to visit in Switzerland and in Germany. And it's going to be different not having him around, I think, and hopefully we can have a big party at the Liederkranz for him. Whether he wants to come out to that or not, I'm not sure, but I would hope that we could. And, I just want to wish him all the best. And I wish I would have said that all in German, but alas, college wasn't as good as he was. So,
Yeah, I would also like to reiterate some of those accolades for those folks who are retiring. And I know we always have, I believe it's in the spring, the board gets together with the administration and the retiring employees for a little a dinner and a way to commend them. And I'm hoping maybe in some ways we'll be able to do that this year. I'm not sure if we are or not. One thing I was just thinking about, though, as I looked at the agenda, I wonder in the future whether we might be able to kind of add the years of service for the retirees, years of service in the school district. I think that would help us understand the commitment that these folks have made, the years that they put into their work here at Exeter.
Okay, thank you. And then I would be remiss to not mention Mrs. Drazak, who 2 out of my 3 children had and loved. So wishing her well on her retirement as well. Okay, so we do have a motion on the table for all those personnel items. All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 9-0. Okay. Moving forward to Finance, Facilities, and Audit Committee, Mr. Ahrens.
it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the following finance, facilities, and audit items. Number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7.
Is there a second? There's any discussion?
2 to
2 through
7.
7.
And then we're coming back to 1.
Okay, and hearing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 9-0.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the following finance, facilities, and audit items. Number 1, the 2021-2022 Berks County Intermediate Unit Mandated Services Budget with Exeter District's portion being $46,837.69.
Mr. Fite, could we please have a roll call vote?
Yes. Hunter Ahrens,
Aye.
Michael Japina,
Aye.
Hurry Miller,
Aye.
Dr. David Hemberger,
Aye.
John Fidler,
Aye.
Dr. Ann Herring,
Aye.
Allison Wilson,
Aye.
Dr. Sharon McClendon,
Aye.
Michelle Stratton,
Aye.
all 9, yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
And I just wanted to give everybody an update quickly. I was able to sit down with Brian yesterday, and we got to talk a little bit about the budget, and I just wanted to share some of my takeaways from that, which was just encouraging. It appears that our revenues are exceeding what we had budgeted to a significant degree, and maybe even coming close to where we were last year, if not exceeding that in some areas. So I was very pleased to see that. So it appears that coupled with our expenses and the support that we are getting from the federal government and the state government, that we're probably going to have a much smaller deficit than we anticipated. So I just thought that was great news that I wanted to share with everybody. And there will be more to come on that So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron's. Moving on to Policy Committee, Dr. Hamburger.
Thanks, Mrs. Wilson. It's recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the following policies for first reading and second reading as outlined in the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion. Any discussion?
So I'll just ask Dr. Minor, as it relates to the lesson plans, is that something that we review with our teachers or our building staff just to, I mean, most people don't read policies. So I'm just curious, like when we're reviewing this, if we push it out.
That's a great question, Mr. Japina, and I think you're right. A lot of people don't read policy. However, Dr. Winters and I had discussed this one in particular because this is one of the few policies that directly has to do with work products. So I don't know if Dr. Winters wants to say a few words about the history of discussing lesson plans here. Again, I haven't been here really long enough to know what policies have been shared with teachers and in what format, that directly impacted them in the past.
I know that with regard to lesson plans, there is an expectation that all principals have, that teachers are doing them and making them accessible if needed, in terms of a very formal process that is followed in terms of reviewing the policy to the letter. I don't believe that has not happened directly out of my office in my time that I've been here. Lesson plans is kind of tricky because we all trust our teachers that's just one of the professional responsibilities that teachers do. They develop quality lesson plans. This revision to the policy basically enables the opportunity for teachers to be submitting them electronically and or in paper, depending on what version folks use. Since we're using Schoology with such dedication, most of our teachers have things up on Schoology and housed there. And I think it's really one of those cases where if a principal has concerns as to whether or not, a teacher is doing lesson plans or they feel the need to check them with any kind of regularity, then individual principals are going to make that determination based on their walkthroughs and observations, and if needed, have an individual, conversation with that particular teacher. But by and large, the expectation is that they're doing them, and principals have their own internal checks and balances at the building to manage that.
Okay, there is a motion on the table and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 9-0. Moving forward to the Athletics and Extracurricular Activities Committee, Dr. Herring.
Thank you. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following athletics and extracurricular activities item, the maintenance program for district athletic fields. Attached is the maintenance PDF and a view of the field.
Any discussion? Okay, there's a motion on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries 8-1.
Okay, I have a few items I'd like to share. In this committee, I'd like to highlight a few things that go on in our school. There's so many things that go on that are tremendous. I can only pick a few that I can do every time. So what I have here is I'd like to say Exeter would like to congratulate Sophia Stankiewicz on being selected as a soprano in the All Eastern Chorus after a rigorous audition process. Sophia is an aspiring performer who will be majoring in vocal performance, with her top choices being Baldwin Wallace and Shenandoah for opera performance. During her student career, Exeter Sophia has placed in Berks Junior County Chorus, Berks Senior County Chorus, PMEA District 10 Chorus, PMEA Regional Chorus, PMEA States, and now in her senior year, she's been accepted to All Eastern Chorus. Exeter Swimming had an impressive performance at the Central Penn League Championship meet this weekend. Almost every swimmer had lifetime best swims. 4 school records were broken. 200 individual medley by Megan Unruh with a time of 2 hours, 8 minutes and 34 seconds. 100 breaststroke by Megan Unruh with a time of 1 hour, 5 minutes and 38 seconds. 200 freestyle relay, Hannah Hurlman, Lauren Ramsey, Taylor Stech, and Megan Unruh with a time of 1 hour, 38 and 50 seconds. 200 medley relay, Anderson Chemi, William Fanning, James Creamer, and Jack Saheda with a time of 1 hour, 41 minutes and 50 seconds. The boys and girls bowling teams are in the BCIAA playoffs on Saturday, February 20th. And the wrestling team is in the District 3 sectional tournament on Saturday, February 20th as well. This past Saturday, 29 members of Exeter's Technology Student Association Club competed in their regional competition, which was held virtually. And once again, our students made Exeter very proud. There should be some pictures coming up on our Zoom by Joe. In team events, Exeter placed first in the Webmaster event and took second in both the engineering design and scientific visualization events. Exeter's biotechnology design, digital video production, music production, and video game design teams all placed third in their respective events. In total, 9 teams from Exeter qualified for the state level competition. Exeter also had a number of individual standouts at this year's regional competition. Senior Michael Hummel took second place for transportation modeling. In addition, members Sophia Jones, Hansika Kunduro, and Jada Smith each qualified for the state level competition in their individual events. Lastly, I'd like to share that March 8th through April 4th, if you visit the Exeter Community Library, you'll be able to enjoy a collection of window art created by our Exeter School District students called Window into Art. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Herring. Moving forward to our committee reports, Equity and Excellence at Exeter, Dr. McClendon.
Okay, the Equity Committee met on Monday, February 1st. We had 2 special guests at our meeting, and they were 2 of Mrs. Sparks' students who asked to come on and share some things with us. And I know, Mr. Fiddler, you always talk about wanting to hear from the students, and that is the thing that just means the most to me when I hear from the students. We're doing things to try to help students. We need to hear from them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so anyway, I was excited. We had Anna Claire Olson and Emma McKearns, and they came on and they shared with the group, first of all, why they were interested in doing some work in diversity and equity. They shared a lot about their personal experiences and friends and what some of the friends had experienced. And they also came up with some suggestions of some work that we can do in our equity committee. Just one thing that comes to the top of my mind is like maybe having some sort of assembly or bringing some people in. And there were ideas for, the students and teachers. So we were so pleased to have them. We have a student representative, Carly Patton. And so Mr. Campbell actually connected the 2 of them. Carly's very involved in Burke's youth advocacy group. And so she got those 2 students also, they communicated and they want to do some things, at the schools. So pleased to have them. We also had Mrs. Dina Burkhart presented some excellent ideas, again, for teachers, for students, for parents. Some of them are going to be worked on outside of the group, such as designing a logo, doing some improvements to the link that's for our equity committee, the link on the website, make it more accessible. And let's see, they're going to work on a different type of newsletter, like maybe some ideas for parents or featuring some things with students. But the other thing is we have, as you can see, we have Ms. Jessica Sutherland and Ms. Jordan Sharp. And I asked them if they could come on and share this newsletter that they presented at our meeting. I think it was 2 meetings ago. And I think they might have a few things they're tweaking on that, but it is so great and awesome, and everybody really liked it. And I want them to actually show that to you. And it's on the website now, right? It's posted now, right?
I think it was taken down temporarily while we made some adjustments.
Okay, so if it's not there, we'll get back up there. We're going to be a few things that had to be tweaked with that, but it's great. And there's so much good work going on with this committee, and people are doing work outside of the meetings, and they're coming up with these great ideas, and I'm just so pleased with that. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Sutherland and Ms. Sharp.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessie Sutherland, and I'm an art teacher at Owatton Creek. And I also teach some of the art classes at the other 2 elementary schools. And I serve on the Equity and Excellence Committee. So thank you very much for having us here tonight. Thank you, Dr. McClendon, for inviting us. I know Jordan and I are both excited to share what we've been working on with you. So the idea for the newsletter was to create a resource for teachers on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want to pull that up and share it with you, but first I'll let Ms. Sharp introduce herself, and I'll get that ready.
Thank you. Hi, I am Jordan Sharp. I teach high school I teach English, sorry, at the high school. And I also teach English as a second language at the high school. So I primarily teach 9th and 10th grade. And then English as a second language is 9th through 12th grade for the high school. So we are very excited to present this to you. So I think Jessie is going to share her screen to show you.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull this up here and someone can give me a thumbs up. Actually, I can see the boardroom, so I can see you guys can see it. Awesome. So I just wanted to start off by saying that I am not an expert on equity, diversity, and inclusion, but it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm always trying to learn more. And fortunately, there's a lot of great resources out there created by people who are experts. So what Jordan and I tried to do is to sort of sift through some of that content and to pull out things that we thought would be useful to teachers. So we picked things that would cover a variety of different topics and could be applicable to different grade levels and different subject areas. And so hopefully any teacher could look through and find something of value. So you're looking at here the first page of the newsletter. And maybe I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see it a little bigger. So it starts off with the mission statement of the committee. And then there is a table of contents. So you can see that the first category is classroom resources and strategies. So most of the resources fall under that. There's also a short section on professional development and a featured teacher and also a featured student. And then a calendar section with some upcoming heritage months and things of that nature. So the first resource on this page is it's called How to Audit Your Classroom Library for Diversity. So this speaks to having representation in the books that we read to students. And there's a specific resource there for teachers that they could use to audit their classroom library or the books that are in their curriculum to make sure that a variety of different people and voices are represented. And then the second page here is, I like to zoom out so you can see the overview first. So this is more focused on people with different abilities. So the first article is about a teacher who created an accessibility curriculum. And so there's some resources around that topic, and then a book at the bottom called Just Ask by Sonia Sotomayor. And that's about, again, people with different abilities. And it's just a really nice way to kind of have that discussion with younger kids and really celebrate the differences that people have. This page is a little more focused on race, and there's an artist here featured named Angelica Das.
And she takes photographs of people in order to show that we don't all really fit into the categories of black and white, or as she says, red and yellow, and that we're all kind of somewhere in between, and there's more similarities between us than there are differences. So there's some other resources as well here that would be good ways to extend a discussion around her work. For example, a PBS website that goes into the genetics of race, or I guess rather how it's not genetic. So those are, again, kind of extensions of her work or connections. And then there's an article here called Teaching Young Children About Race. So this I found to be a really nice resource with some approachable strategies for talking about race with elementary school kids. And then I'm gonna turn it over to Jordan in a second here to do the rest, but I first wanted to point out that she is our featured teacher. Since this was our first edition, I asked her if she would be willing to be featured in the newsletter, because I know that she does a lot of equity work in her classroom, and she graciously accepted. So the lesson that is featured here by Jordan is around the book To Kill a Mockingbird, which she reads with her freshman class, I believe, and you can correct anything.
Yeah, I can continue. So
okay,
yeah, I read To Kill a Mockingbird with my freshmen, and we just really got into deep conversations this year about, because I was thinking about, okay, we're reading this book that is written by a white author, that is in the literary canon, told from the perspective of a young white child, and how can we bring in different perspectives there that are missing and kind of fill in the gaps. And so I found this skill, it's from Teaching Tolerance, which is now called Learning for Justice, but this skill called reading against the text or reading against the grain, which really involves students challenging their dominant readings and their prominent beliefs in order to bring less represented individuals into the textual discourse. So I had a lot of success with that. I'm still working through To Kill a Mockingbird because we had a lot of snow days. So we're working on that now. And then right above, there's a section for professional development. I listened to a lot of podcasts on my way to school and on the way back, and these were just two that really stuck out for me, relating to what we're going through right now. So the first one is from, well, actually, they're both from NPR's Code Switch podcast, but the first one is titled The Kids Are All Right. And really, like Dr. McClendon talked about, it gives kids the perspective to share their thoughts about what teachers should be doing in the classroom, what conversations we should be having. And the second one is about teaching during the coronavirus, and a lot of responses as to how do we discuss issues of race, diversity, and equity in this time where so many people are being blamed for so many things, and there's almost this hostile environment going on. So those were just two podcast recommendations. And of course, when we would give new issues, we would update those. And then this page is almost like a mark your calendar page. So at the top, we have a bunch of dates that we thought were representative of a variety of abilities and identities. So we put those on there. And then we also had a student spotlight. We did mention Carly Patton is a member of our committee, which is really cool. She's in 12th grade, and she has done a lot of work serving on the Youth Advisory Board of Berks County. And she created this project that the acronym is STAR, but it's Stand Together Against Racism. And she works with other volunteers from across Berks County, and she's had so much success with this. You can see on the right hand side, there's a QR code to her website. She designed that logo herself, and she is just a huge advocate for talking about race, talking about social injustice in the classroom, and having student voices lead those changes, helping students see themselves as change agents in the classroom. And so she even connected with two of my ninth grade students who attended the meeting last month. So that was really cool. And of course, we would rotate the student spotlight as well with new issues. And I already have a whole list of students who would love to be featured.
Ms. Sharp, before we leave from talking about Carly Patton, I was going to mention this, but I'll mention it now. I mean, you said a lot. She is really awesome, and that's her logo that she created there. And one of the things that happened this month was, in conjunction with artist Robert Pepper, he turned that into a huge 8-foot by 16-foot 3D structure, and the students put their words like sentences with their feelings, their experiences, their hopes about racism, and they put those on along with artwork. And you can see this display. Let me see, it's at the Berks County Community Foundation in honor of Black History Month, and it's going to be there for the entire month. She said that's something she's really proud of, and we are really proud of Carly, for the work that she's doing. And so if you get a chance, I'm not really sure on, how you get access to be in the building, but, try to get a chance to see that before the end of the month if you can, because I think that's just an awesome honor that they took her logo and made a big 3D structure. So, and I actually want to bring Carly on. I didn't ask her first, but I'm hoping to bring her on to share some things at our next meeting too. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Short.
Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah, so that's what we had. We are so thankful that you gave us the opportunity to share this with you. And we're definitely open to any comments and feedback because, as Dr. McClendon mentioned, we're still working on editing this. We also are in the midst of getting an email for the Equity Committee. So that is another thing that will be added to that as well.
Right. And when we talk about this is a working committee. We have goals. We're going to be, working on ways to try to do that. But we're like a work in progress. We're going to keep working on things as we get new ideas. And, it's just, I cannot be happier about this group. The other thing is I know we're allowed to have up to 4 board members without having a quorum. And Mr. Aarons is not going, he was on our committee, but he's not going to be able to continue. So I would like to invite, if you, a board member, if you'd like to just maybe come on at one of the meetings, see what we're doing, see if you think it's something you'd like to do. But we'd like to have fill Mr. Aaron's spot on the committee if we have someone who's interested. And I don't mind if you just say, come on for one meeting and see what you think. So our next meeting is actually Monday, March 1st. Okay.
I just had a quick question. One of the things that jumped out in my mind when I was kind of listening about this, how impactful To Kill a Mockingbird and I think it's Night by Elie Wiesel as well in 10th grade are for myself, as well as many of the kids that I graduated with, as well as those under and above. And I would just encourage the administration and the faculty to continue utilizing that, because they have had great success, I think, for even a generation of students. And I can, personally point to both of those books being formative in that experience for myself. And I know just getting feedback from some of my peers at the time that it definitely was for them as well.
I've got a question or two, if I may, to Jordan. Curious to know if you also screen the Robert Mulligan film version of To Kill a Mockingbird in your class.
I used the Gregory Peck version. Is that the same?
Mulligan's the director. Yeah, that's
okay. Yeah. So yeah, I do use that in conjunction, but I show certain parts. So I kind of break it up, especially this year. So we might read chapter 1, watch that for chapter 2, things like that. But we do use that in conjunction. I think that watching that gives them such a great idea of setting, and it helps to paint a picture in their mind of characters.
Absolutely. Thank you. I also am curious, I don't know who would answer this, but you have equity and diversity in your class. Do we know how many different classes throughout the district are incorporating the theme of equity and diversity right now?
Yeah, so that's really something that we've been talking about as a committee and that was almost the idea for the newsletter, right? Was here are some great things that we're seeing, that we're doing. How can we encourage others to do this as well? I mean, I know that we as an English department have like common assessments and we have some shared activities and lessons. Like for instance, we all teach the same lesson about Jim Crow laws and we do this Jim Crow web quest. And so there are some commonalities, but yeah, like what Hunter was saying about the teaching To Kill a Mockingbird and Night, they are texts that are so important, but it is interesting how it changes how we teach them now as opposed to how we used to teach them. It is changing. And we start to think about, okay, well, what are those perspectives now that really have been pushed to the margins that we weren't really looking at before, and we should be analyzing them in this way. So I guess our main purpose with this newsletter is, yeah, hey, look what's going on in this classroom. How can we kind of spotlight that into other teachers and other classrooms?
Right. And one final question, if I may, have you considered the work, teaching the work of Toni Morrison in your class?
Yeah. I mean, I personally have read Beloved, and that's also another conversation that I would like to have on our committee is what room do we have to swap out texts? I know that we have a lot of texts that are very traditional and have been monumental in forming students and their beliefs and their personalities. But I do always wonder, like, what would happen if we switched out To Kill a Mockingbird or added in Beloved or a text by Toni Morrison, bringing in a Black perspective? Like, how could that support our white perspective and kind of give us the full picture? And like adding that in throughout, even just excerpts, I think would be beneficial to help fill in those gaps, right? Because I'm trying to fill in the gaps as a white teacher. So that would be good to use those perspectives from a Black person to be able to speak to that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Mrs. Sutherland, Ms. Sharp, thank you so much for coming on and sharing that awesome, wonderful newsletter. And I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing for the Equity Committee, because much of that, or all of it really, was done outside of the meeting on their own time. So, and these two young ladies are so passionate about this work. So I thank you, sincerely thank you for that. So,
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So that concludes the equity report, and then just send me an email or something if you think you might want the board members want to come. We can only have one at a time because we can't have more than 4. That's the end of the report. But Dr. Minor, can we get? I know, Mr. Fiddler, you asked for this last year, I believe. Like, can we know what's going on in the buildings, how people are honoring Black History Month? I know Mr. Isselman, the kindergarten teachers were doing some really nice things. I know that because my grandson's in kindergarten, so I saw what they were doing and teaching even these like 5 and 6-year-olds. So I'd be interested to know if any teachers, want to share, some things that they're doing in their buildings.
Through your committee group, Dr. McClendon, or at the board meeting in general?
Well, I don't know. I guess either way or both.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Flam and Dr. Winters, as we move through that transition of the two of them, can certainly bring forward things to the committee and work with teachers, just like the 2 teachers that you have on tonight. Hopefully, as the newsletter grows and just information about the group grows, that more teachers will share the resources, and through the teaching and learning department, that can be a place to gather that and share best practice, and either report it through the Equity and Excellence Committee and then back out to the board. I'm sure they would be happy to do that, and I think that's part of what you're trying to achieve with this newsletter and with the committee as a whole is just sharing best practices as we all continue to improve in teaching and learning, especially in this regard of equity and excellence.
Right, and I mentioned Black History Month because that's what it is right now, but it's all inclusive. So we're not just looking at racial equity, but we're looking at equity all across the board. So, okay, well, thank you.
Sharon, I'd love to be the next board member to come to your meeting.
Okay, I'm going to put you on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McClendon. Okay, moving forward, Mr. Miller to Exeter Community Education Foundation.
So we did have a meeting on February the 3rd for the ECEF. They really didn't have much to say at this particular meeting. They were talking about the budgets and things like that. One of the things that they are definitely going to have the golf tournament this year because they had to cancel last year, and it's going to be on August the 6th of 2021 at Reading Country Club. Hopefully I'll get to play. We'll see. Yeah, we'll do it. So this should be fun. I think another subject that came up, and I think Dr. Minor, you brought it up, is that I guess there is a program at the Giant where they are able to give some money and contribute. So whenever you go to Giant and say, would you like to give your extra 10 cents or whatever to it, that does go to the school district. So just let you know, please say yes next time they do that. That money does go to them, and they're, this foundation, they do some really excellent work. They've been helping a lot of people in the community. So it's definitely important for them to get as much help as they can because, people are really suffering right now. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Fiddler, Berks Career and Technology Center.
Yes, well, I was all set to give a report, but I see that all board members received the JOC briefs from the BCTC. So I did attend my first meeting. I don't have anything to add to those. I'll try and pick something out for next time beyond the briefs that are published. But I'm delighted to be a part of that group, and we're off to a good start.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fiddler. BCIU Board of Directors, Dr. Hemberger.
Thanks, Mrs. Wilson. As part of our acknowledgement of the celebration of School Director Recognition Month in January, the IU hosted their 4th annual student artwork showcase, and that was highlighted at our last meeting in January. This year's theme was keeping connected in extraordinary times. So one piece of art was selected from each of the 18 Berks County school districts, and they'll be on display in the BCIU boardroom through the end of 2021. And it's also going to be highlighted in a virtual gallery on their BCIU website. It's interesting to note that the piece of artwork that was selected for Exeter was done by Carly Patton, the 12th grader who was just profiled in her work with equity, diversity, and inclusion. So she appears to be a very busy young lady and very talented. What she submitted looked like it was a tapestry of some form, maybe mixed media. So our congratulations go out to Carly for her efforts in recognizing, Exeter. The board also at that meeting authorized the officers of the IU board to execute a collective bargaining agreement with the BCIU Education Association for a 3-year period subject to review by their solicitor and their administration. The details aren't yet publicly available, but when they are, I'll be able to share maybe some of the highlights of that. And as pointed out this evening as well, another item that we just passed, the IU Board of Directors approved their mandated services proposed budget, which was $1,763,000 because of the economic situation. The district's proposed district contribution to that budget remains stable. The total throughout all the 18 districts is $739,874. So that's an zero increase to school districts. And for Exeter, as we saw this evening, as we approved this evening, the Exeter share of that will be $46,837. So that's all for my report. I will say we do have a board meeting this Thursday evening, our February board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, but we will come right back at you for legislative liaison.
Okay. One thing I'd like to point out to the board is that there was a COLA meeting, which is the Committee on Legislative Action, COLA meeting that was held on February 9th. These meetings are held about 4 times a year. The most recent meeting was held virtually. And part of the meeting, as you may recall, in a communication I sent to the board, featured Governor Wolf's budget, and then the other part of the meeting really had to do with the IU's plan for targeted advocacy. So they have a targeted advocacy campaign. It's they call it a 10 by 10 campaign. It's going to go on, I think, for 10 weeks. This is an effort to reach out to our legislators to emphasize the need for regulatory changes in 3 important areas: special education funding, charter school funding reform, and relief from the costly mandates associated with mandatory trainings, which takes up about 13% of the professional development time for school districts. So there'll be advocacy work, including letters to legislators. They put together a 1-page summary, which I shared with board members today, that districts can use also in their discussions, with legislators. So that's an interesting fact sheet. I think it provides all the information that we need to know about some of the big issues that have to do with the impacts of special ed underfunding, cyber charter, being a big part of our concern as a school district in terms of the impact of the unfair funding formula that's in place, and then of course the relief from training mandates. I think the first 2 though are priorities for the IDU. So I'll keep the board posted as we get more information in regard to that advocacy campaign. That's all I have for my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamburger. And I appreciate those fact sheets were great resources. So
Great.
thank you for sending those our way.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Aaron's Township Borough Liaison.
Yep, I have been in communication with Joe Staub on a number of issues. He's the Township's liaison from the Board of Supervisors. One thing I just wanted to share with the board is that we are getting ready to share our sketch plan for the Kerr Road facility for the bus garage, and the Township is going to review that as expeditiously as possible. This is just in the process of being sketched out formally for their review by their engineers. Because of the scale and importance of the project, they're going to require probably something more than just a hand drawing. So that's why we're going through this process to make sure we have all our T's crossed and I's dotted. So the sketch plan would be sent to the Township zoning officer, but that would be reviewed internally with the engineer in the zoning department.
Okay, that concludes our meeting. Are there any board members who would like to be heard at this time?
Mrs. Wilson, I'd like to make a couple comments if I could.
Sure.
So last month, the board voted against the recommendation to keep a second transportation facility option on the table by voting against any further consideration of the Owatton site. So we're now essentially down to one option, which is the demolition and reconstruction of the current facility on Kerr Road. So I want to share my thoughts as to why I believe this is an unfortunate and short-sighted choice, and why it fails in so many ways to meet both our current and future needs, primarily because of its small size and its unfortunate location. A few weeks ago, Mr. Fike provided the board with a decision matrix from 2015. And, when you examine that document, you contrast the current Kerr Road location to the other potential sites. The Kerr Road location fails in a number of areas, including severe size restrictions, being like the smallest parcel at 2.4 acres, the inefficient layout, the inadequate parking for employees, and a very congested and precarious pullout for our drivers. It also fails to provide the district any future options, should we decide to expand for any reason, like accommodating for cleaner or more efficient fueling, such as propane, or expanding in ways that we may find become more affordable and preferable in the future, such as electric or solar. There's simply no room at our current location for any option other than diesel. And there's no room for expansion in the event the district should grow in any ways that we can't predict within the next 30 to 50 years. But I wanted to talk really about cost, because with the proposed demolition and construction of the Kerr Road facility, although we don't have any really firm estimates at this time, it looks like it'll probably cost somewhere between, I'm going to ballpark $1.5 to $2 million to demolish and rebuild. These costs don't really take into consideration anything for propane fueling, which will need to be constructed on an alternate site within the district. And much has been made about the costs of a $4 million project at the Owatton Creek site, where we have over 80 acres available, 80 acres of unused property. So we often ask, and we've heard this question come up before, what's the impact on our taxpayers of this kind of a capital project? What will the average homeowner have to pay in annual property taxes? You need to remember, this is a capital project, and the cost of construction is paid out over several years, presumably 8 to 10 years, based upon what I've learned. So the average homeowner in this scenario would pay about $1 to $2 per year for the demolition and construction of the property on the Kerr Road location, the current location. And for the Owatton construction, the average cost for the estimated cost for the per year for your average homeowner would be $3 to $4 per year. So either option is about a penny or less a day for that average homeowner in our school district. And the difference between the two projects, when we're considering one over the other, is about $1 or $2 a year. If you look at how much one would cost versus the other, if we're looking at trying to compare apples and apples. So by sticking with the inferior option, we would save the average taxpayer less than a penny a day, or a fraction of a penny of a day. And I don't really see this as saving taxpayers' dollars. I mean, we choose a clearly inadequate option for less than a penny a day. So from my perspective, the current course we're moving on is impractical and is financially irresponsible. We're selecting a site that's clearly inadequate for our current needs, let alone our future needs. And we're essentially, I think, throwing away $2 million, because at some point, the district will realize that this location is just not adequate. Either it'll be due to further congestion on Shelbourne, the inefficiencies of operating at different locations throughout the district, or the need to expand to accommodate a new energy infrastructure. And that's when we'll be stuck with a $2 million facility that's no longer of use to us. So the decisions we make now and the burdens and inefficiencies that we allow will impact on our transportation system for the next 30 to 50 years. And the limitations of this site will force us to scatter our operations across the district, which is a hardship that will continue again into the future and be felt most by our transportation staff, our drivers, mechanics, and program supervisors. So consolidating our operations to a single, safe, and expandable location is without question a more efficient, and I think in the long term, a more cost-effective and more fiscally responsible decision. Selling off the current Kerr Road site, that 2.4 acres, putting it back on the tax rolls, giving relief to the residents of that area who've had to live with this facility tightly packed between their residential homes, and then investing in a facility that reflects what I think should be the vision and the quality of our district. That's what I think we need to do. This is an investment, and whether at a Watton or Lausch or an other adequately sized and safe location, anything, I believe, but the Kerr Road site, I believe that's an expensive mistake. So I ask the board, as we go forward with our plans, to please consider these arguments as we determine our course of action going forward. So thank you. That's all for my comments, Mrs. Wilson.
So I'd like to just hop in here for a second.
And I want to hop in after you, Mr. Japina.
Pardon me?
I want to hop in after you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I appreciate your comments, Dave, and we don't have any numbers yet, but prior, we've been talking about a potential $1.5 million spend versus a $4 million. It's not going to be $4 million. It was $4 million several years ago. I can just tell you that I cast my first vote on this issue 8 years ago, and I hope to actually cast a vote and get this thing done before I leave the board in 2023. At that point, well, we'll have been dealing with this issue for 10 years. And in that time, we've talked about this thing falling apart. And if we continue to delay this, this thing absolutely will fall apart till we ever get a chance to take a vote on this thing. And, I hope to make it to the day where we don't see that and we can make a decision. I support what will definitely be a much cheaper fix at Kerr Road. I think that we all realize that this needs to be done and that we need to do it soon. I think the community understands the declining nature of the current location. I think they're willing to support a fix, but they're not necessarily willing to support a brand new facility. We talk about 80 acres at Owatton, but technically we have 80 acres, but they're not 80 developable acres. I don't know what percentage of those acres are developable, but it's not like we're sitting on 80 acres of land that we can actually develop. So I think we have to sort of understand that issue. I think that in my sense, we need to get something done. And I think that spending a penny or two, it's one way to look at it, but the reality is we're talking about something that's going to be about $1.5 million versus something that's going to be over $5 million, and somebody has to pay that bill. Clearly this facility needs some work. We've been talking about it for 8 years. We've been talking about it for longer than that, and yet this facility and the people who run it and the people who work there continue to perform amazing work despite the fact that this facility needs some work. And I think if we put $1.5 million in to get it fixed up and address some of those issues, we will get 30 to 50 years out of a new location. It won't be brand new, but it also won't cost us $5 million.
Well, let me just say a few things to kind of maybe address some of the points that you made, Mr. Japina. I really don't think that we're going to get our money's worth, that $1.5 million. First of all, I don't know whether we're going to be able to do it for $1.5 million. We're building a completely brand new facility, essentially on the Kerr Road site. We're having to raise virtually the entire structure because of how decayed and deteriorated it is. And we're putting it in a location that continues to have all of the problems that we had even before it's reconstructed, with the exception of, a new building, a newer building. It totally lacks adequate parking. It totally lacks the opportunity for us to kind of provide that in a safe location. It doesn't give us anything in regard to expansion for the kind of energy production that we need, energy fueling systems that we need. And it is, there's no question that the Shelbourne Road area, if anybody from this community rides along that road, which we do, especially during rush hour times, that is a very congested and very challenging road to even pull out on. Even during the middle of the day, if I'm a driver and if I'm pulling out in my vehicle, it's in my own personal vehicle, it's very much of a challenge to get off of there. So I'm not necessarily trying to delay things. I think the board decision last month has delayed things because we were moving forward with an option with two options that we're going to try to allow the board to kind of request the township to seek a variance, on that property, and that was one of the options. If that would go through, that would continue to remain an option. And then the Kerr Road site, certainly we accommodated. I think it was important for us to accommodate that as an alternative. But I see the Kerr Road site as having no future. And I think if we're going to invest our money, we should be investing it, for the next 30 to 50 years, as we had previously, where the current location is. Sell it off, get the tax revenue from the location there, take it out of a residential area where it is right now. Totally unsuitable for where it is right now. Totally unsuitable. Just my thoughts on that. And I know Dr. McClendon may have some thoughts too. So
I'd just like to say it may be, from your perspective, totally unsuitable, but it has been entirely workable. And the community knows that it's there. We understand the hours and the traffic associated with that. And again, I'm just going to look at $1.5 million or 2 million, whatever it is. I can promise you that building a brand new facility will not come to us under $5 million. And I will also promise you that PennDOT will make us do road work that will add to the cost of that project.
From what I know, Mr. Japina, the costs are about $4 million and not $5 million at this point. And that's taking all those factors into consideration, in addition to, propane fueling stations and security and fencing around the perimeter of the property, which will not be available in the current Kerr Road site.
The only thing that I wanted to say was, I remember when almost 4 years ago, when I was running for the board and hearing the term, the garage mahal, and, I think I was probably at that time thinking, no, that's not a good idea. But having been on the board and learned so much about it, visited the current facility and talking to, the bus drivers and learning a lot more about it, that's why, I changed my mind and voted, that we should be looking at Awadden Creek. That's one thing. The other thing is that I was going to say that we were presented a while back with a modified plan for that building, other than what they originally had, where they scaled back some things and to reduce the cost. I know that there was some additional cost because as the longer you put it off, then there's cost of living types of increases. But they did scale it back from what the original one was in size, and I don't remember all the other ways, but they looked to see how can they streamline that to save cost. The other thing is that we've had at least 2 studies, bus studies. One I think was back in 2010-11, and one less than 2 years ago, and they came back to show that our bus drivers, our bus department can do it at a big savings. So we made a commitment to keep our own buses in-house. And I agree with everything you said, Dr. Hamburger. This would maybe, to me, I see it like putting a Band-Aid on something for now, but we need to look at years from now. If it's already inadequate and we're just going to get by with this now, what will happen in 10, 30, 50 years from now? So I think we need to be looking at that also. So I just want to say, I do agree with all of the points that you made. And it's not like we're not sensitive to taxpayers and what, people, to taxes. We are sensitive to that, but we also have a responsibility to make decisions that are going to be, good for the district. Long term too, not just now.
So when we talk about the productivity or the efficiency of the facility, both the studies that were done, neither of them factored in the millions of dollars associated with the construction of a new bus facility. So that doesn't diminish from their efficacy, but we also can tell from these studies that were done that the building doesn't seem to hinder their efficacy or their productivity or their capability. I mean, they have knocked it out of the park. and 2 independent studies. So the question really becomes, if you put $4 million into a facility or $5 million into a facility, can they get $5 million better in terms of their productivity? The other thing I will say is that when I first dealt with this issue in 2013, part of the reason that I was livid is I saw the need to invest money into the school buildings where the kids are spending the majority of their day. And when I walked into my daughter's science class, biology class, and saw this contraption coming out of the ceiling and thought, geez, I went home and said, that was kind of cool. What was that? And she goes, what are you talking about? I said, the thing from the ceiling that came down and captured the water. She goes, oh, that's where the ceiling collapsed in on the class. So if we have money to spend, I'm going to put it into the classrooms. I'm going to support our folks, but I'm going to put it into the classrooms where the money is better spent. We'll put it into these facilities to support our folks, but they have been knocking it out of the park driving these buses in a facility. They've figured out how to do it. And I just don't see that spending $5 million is going to give us a $5 million return.
I agree, Mr. Kina. I think that we have to do 3 things. We have to provide transportation for our students, and we've been doing a wonderful job with that. And we need a safe building for our employees, which is what we need to accomplish here. And we also need an affordable cost for our taxpayers. And that's why I feel, again, we should move forward with Kerr Road. Another thing that was mentioned, that facility has been there since the 70s. Neighborhoods have grown up around it. People have moved there because of it. I've actually heard neighbors say it's a nice neighbor to have. It's quiet on the weekends. They know what to expect from it. So we also have to remember that. Is there anybody else that would like to be heard? Yes, Mr. Aaron.
Yeah. Oh,
I just want to suggest that a lot of this discussion is, still fruitful because we're going to be moving forward with whatever we do in the future. The most inexpensive place to build a building is on paper. We still got a lot of that process left, and we can test some of those concerns, both with renewable energy infrastructure, such as propane fueling, or even the possibility of exchanging that out at some point for electric. So there's still a lot of that process. And I don't know if there's enough evidence to really say that the Kerr Road facility wouldn't fulfill all those needs, which is why I supported it last week. I find a number of the things that Dr. Hamburger said persuasive, but on the same token, there's still a lot of process left to play out, and a lot of the needs that we've identified, especially additional wash bays and maintenance bays, are added with the Kerr Road facility reconstruction that we're looking at. So I think it's probably just too early to tell that that is not a suitable option for some of the reasons that you've laid out, Dr. Hamburger.
Did somebody else want to say something from?
yes, I'd like to return to the reason we're all here, education. I was on a conference call today with the PSBA. It's a weekly kind of a coffee clutch with different programs. And then there was some Q&A afterwards, and a representative of the board from Saucon Valley spoke up. And the topic had shifted to the COVID-19 situation. And she said that they looked at the course failure rate in the district, mostly in the high school, and found that it had increased 50% as a result of the COVID, starting with the COVID slide last spring, the slide over the summer, and the ongoing slide in the fall. And so I wanted to bring that up and see if the administration had any thoughts on that as we look at what the effects will be of COVID on the Exeter Township School District. And I was wondering if in looking at that, you are looking at the failure rate in the high school. That is the course failure rate.
Yes, Mr. Vidler, that is, I think, not unique to Saucon Valley, but is something that school districts throughout the entire country, I don't know, maybe even the entire world, are seeing students, particularly at the secondary level, because there's more propensity to fail at the secondary level than the elementary level, having more failures. I know Mr. Campbell had spoken to the principals group in the county, and I think to the school, they were experiencing more failures than they have in a typical year. So it is something that we track. One of the things that we have done is ask the high school and the junior high school to take a look at students who were struggling academically, meet with those families, and provide additional support opportunities, including additional time in the building to help those students kind of right their academic ship. So I know Dr. Flam is in the audience. I don't know if he wants to say a few words about what that's looked like at the junior high and at the high school in terms of really trying to connect with families where students have struggled academically throughout the pandemic. Dr. Flam.
Yeah, certainly, Dr. Miner. Recognizing that we have had students falling behind, we did reach out to a number of families and encourage students to come into the building. Students who had been in the building for 2 days per week were invited to come in for additional days. Students who hadn't been in the building at all were invited to come in. A number of our students are in the building now 5 days per week. Of course, we started with 2 groups, each coming in 2 days per week. We added a 3rd day every other week to both of those groups. So we've made efforts to try to get more students into the building, to try to provide supports. Of course, early on, students that we recognized who had special needs were invited to come in 5 days per week to receive services. So we have increased our efforts to get more students into the building while maintaining social distancing and a safe environment, and we'll continue to do so. We'll make every effort to make sure that we're providing the supports that are necessary for students in a safe and secure environment. So every week, we look at our reports and evaluate how students are doing. And if we see students who are falling behind, we're reaching out, our counselors are reaching out, Mr. Alcaro and I are reaching out, and I know the same is happening at the high school. So we're making every effort to include students as much as we possibly can.
Great, thank you.
Can it be said that the majority of the kids that were struggling because they were having difficulty with the virtual model?
I don't know that that can be said exactly for all students, but I certainly think that this situation that we're dealing with this year has provided a unique challenge for students. And so when we see students coming into the building, sometimes they're more successful, sometimes they're not, but we're certainly giving them the opportunity to work with their teachers and to access the supports that we feel would be beneficial.
I don't know if you can answer this, but did you notice that after the first quarter, once the students went back to, some students went to hybrid, that after the second quarter, that grades improved overall for those students?
I think it's student dependent, to be honest with you, because we had a significant number of students who in the first quarter in the virtual environment were very successful, and they continued to be successful in the second quarter. We had some students who weren't, and when they returned to the building became more successful, certainly. But we've had students in the building who, despite the fact that we're providing the supports, haven't been successful, and we're continuing to work with them. So I think it's student specific. You're welcome.
Do we have, back to my original question, do we have a sense of how much our failure rate has increased? I mean, Saucon Valley, the board member was actually able to identify 50%. Do we have a number here at Exeter on how much our failure rates have increased?
We haven't generated a specific number, Mr. Fidler. We've been, noticing, like, as I said, students who struggle and then trying to work with them on an individual basis. But, to my knowledge, there hasn't been a year-over-year comparison in terms of the broad stroke of how many students versus years in the past. If that's something that the education committee or the board as a whole wants the school to to produce, we could look into that. But it's going through a lot of data because I'm not sure we kept track of failures overall in the past. So I don't know, Dr. Winters, is that something that in previous years we had numbers on the failure rates that were aggregated?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that. I know it's not something that I specifically have tracked. I don't know how much would be involved to determine that. I believe On Hand Schools warehouses some of that data, so I'd be able to go in and probably do a preliminary and see.
I'm just curious what the utility of that is, or maybe the better question would be, what metrics or data are we relying on to help us understand how significant the problem is, or is it more of a subjective in classroom approach that teachers are kind of responding to when they do some of the, I guess it's the math facts or the, I think Dibbles might be IEP stuff, so I might be getting that wrong. I think it's the reading fluency tests that they do quarterly or they do every year. Dibbles, okay, yeah.
I'm not sure that I completely understood the question, Mr. Ahrens. Is it just in terms of individual student success and the differences around grades versus a more standardized assessment like the Dibbles?
Well, I guess my question is, when we're moving into, let's say, 2021, 2022, how are we kind of saying, this is our starting point where now, 25% of students are actually behind? Because we have, the statistics that we print in the newspaper and all that jazz. But localized to Exeter, how are individual teachers going to be responding to either data or just subjective information? So I'm curious what those metrics or subjective information are.
Well, it's a good question. And I think it's, what Mr. Fiddler's talking about is a failure rate. So a failure rate, especially at the secondary level, could be indicative of a student's not turning in their work, something along those lines. But in terms of measuring student progress against set grade level expectations or benchmarks, for instance, using the Faunus and Pinnell benchmark assessment system to determine what level of students reading at, what the grade level standard is set by Faunus and Pinnell, and then where our students are relative to that, or using the STAR computer adaptive assessment, which we've spoken about several times, that looks at, again, a set benchmark, a scaled score that's indicative of meeting a grade level standard. So we have those types of assessments. I actually think those types of assessments, particularly K to 6, are extremely important because they're pegged to a moment in time and an expectation that we know builds in the future. Failures are obviously really important. We don't want a student to not have mastered the content, or we don't want a student certainly not to have acquired credits to graduate. But failures are more subjective in terms of, are they a result of, again, not producing work or not understanding the content versus, standardized assessments. So we'll mostly be looking at those kind of standardized assessments, and we have the ability to look at STAR all the way up through high school. At this point, it looks as though the PSSA and the Keystone would be administered again this year. So those kinds of things that measure against a particular standard, we can say, well, this child is falling behind that standard, or this child has, met that particular standard. So with the failure, again, we're, at the secondary level, primarily concerned about credit attainment, because we don't necessarily know the definition of that failure. Did the child truly not understand the standard, or didn't try on the test, or didn't, it's more difficult to ascertain what that means. So we will, in September, have all of those benchmark assessments administered to students, and then we'll obviously start instruction from there. And then at the Education Committee meeting on the 2nd, we'll also be talking about our plans for summer and how we're going to be using the STAR and other data this year to invite students to participate in an intensive summer program to help make up for those gains those losses prior to the start of the school year. So we're kind of attacking it from both fronts.
Thank you.
I have a question, if it's okay. I was looking through the enrollment reports that we get every month, and I noticed in looking at the non-public school numbers that at the end of the last school year, we were at 153 students that were non-public school students. And then as of January 31st, it's now 282. that number increased severely. Or is that typical? I guess my question is that something that's typically expected, or is this because of where we're at with the pandemic? And so do we do exit interviews of these students to find out what their reasoning is for leaving?
So there are a couple different questions there. So again, the same thing as Mr. Fiddler said with Stockton Valley and the increase in failures. I think all schools to some extent saw an exodus of students to a large extent to cyber charter schools. When the pandemic broke out, they didn't want to wait and see how schools did. A lot of schools last spring really didn't do well at all with cyber education. And so I think a lot of families thought, well, let's go to people who have more experience. So we lost students to those schools. And then a lot of the parochial schools and private schools, because they're smaller, a lot of different reasons, we're able to offer, in-person instruction. And for some families that was, of critical import, or they just felt more comfortable in the circumstance. In terms of an exit interview, I don't think that was done at the time. And and that certainly happens. Even some families chose to homeschool this year who hadn't homeschooled previously. Again, concerns of the pandemic. What we are doing now is actually reaching out to families. So Mrs. Harris has been reaching out to homeschool families, Dr. Winters, and now Mr. Wilczek have been reaching out to families who are in cyber charters and looking and saying, do you intend to come back? What would be the barriers for you to come back? We do really want you to come back to Exeter by next school year, if not sooner, and really solicit and find out what would it take to get you back here? What are your concerns? And and again, as Dr. Flam said, it's individualized to the family, depending on what their rationale was in the first place for deciding that an option was safer or was more conducive to childcare, or they felt would, offer a more consistent education over time. We obviously had a lot of changes in our instructional model. So our primary goal and focus right now isn't so much why they left initially, because there is so many different reasons, but how can we get you back to Exeter? We want our students to be here. We think this is the best place for our students to be. Obviously, families pay taxes. We don't want them to then pay private school tuition. Part of the reason that we're having Mr. Wilczek, and he talked about at the last meeting, really work on making a more robust cyber program than our EVA has historically been. So families who want to continue with cyber can do it here at Exeter next year. That's the focus of our leadership team, is really trying to connect with families and find out what do you need to see at the school? What are your concerns, so that you come back to us in the fall. You're welcome.
Okay, if there are no objections, I will adjourn this meeting. Hearing no objections, this meeting is adjourned.
Ellis, I just had to say that I really am loving the beard.
Thank you.